Welcome to the Strength for the Day podcast, which is a daily Bible study with Dennis Fountain. We hope this time together will be challenging, sharpening, uplifting, encouraging, and strengthening to your Christian walk. Thank you for joining us, and we pray you are helped through today's study. Hey, happy Monday, and welcome to Strength for the Day. This episode is going out on Monday, March 18th of 2024. And so I hope you had a good weekend. We had a great weekend at our church this last weekend, and thankful for what the Lord is just continuing to do in our church. You pray for us. We've got a lot coming up, and really just an exciting season of ministry here. Have the teens going to youth conference in April. We've got our community Sunday in May, and then we have camp in June, junior camp in July, vacation Bible school, and then August we do a couple outreaches and have our Sunday Church at the Lake on August, I don't know, I think it's the 18th, August 18th this year. But of course, right around the corner from all of us right now, as of this recording, is Easter, Resurrection Sunday. So we're looking forward to that at Moses Lake Baptist. But this morning, we're going to dive right back into our study. If you were here in the last episode, whether you're watching, listening on a podcast or on YouTube or Facebook, we left off in the book of Judges and chapter number 8. And we saw the life of Gideon. And remember, God used Gideon to deliver the children of Israel from the Midianites and the Amalekites. And I wish that Gideon's life story would have just stopped for us about partway through chapter 8 of Judges, because it's at the end of Judges that we read the sad commentary of Gideon's latter years and how he caused Israel to turn their back on the Lord. And we're actually going to see the ramifications of that decision as we come to Judges chapter number 9. So let's just jump in. Let's read Judges chapter 9. We're going to start with the first 6 verses, and then we'll get the context of the entire chapter and wrap up with a couple challenges. So Judges chapter 9 and verse number 1. Then Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, which remember is Gideon. So Abimelech, the son of Gideon, he went to Shechem to his mother's brothers and spoke with them and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, "Please speak in the hearing of all the men of Shechem. Which is better for you, that all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal reign over you, or that one reign over you? Remember that I am your own flesh and bone." And his mother's brothers spoke all these words concerning him in the hearing of all the men of Shechem, and their heart was inclined or turned to follow Abimelech, for they said, "He is our brother." So they gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal-berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men, and they followed him. Then he went to his father's house in Ophrah and killed his brothers, the 70 sons of Gideon, Jerubbaal, on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left because he hid himself. And all the men of Shechem gathered together, all of Beth Millo, and they went and made Abimelech king beside the terebinth tree at the pillar that was in Shechem. So here's what we find. We find Abimelech coming on the scene, and he goes to the men of Shechem. He goes to this group that would represent part of the people of Israel, to follow those who would follow God. And remember, Gideon had said, "I'm not going to rule over you. I don't want my kids to rule over you, but God will rule over you. But give me of the spoils of the plunder, the plunder of the war, and let's make an idol." And so they made this idol. Remember Judges chapter number 8. And Gideon did this. Well, Gideon's family is watching this all unfold. Right? Gideon was, he was a hypocrite. He was double-tongued in this. Hey, the Lord is your king. Oh, by the way, let's worship this idol. Well, the family is watching this. So now Gideon passes off the scene. The children of Israel are walking away, running from God. And what we discover is that Abimelech, his son, comes on the scene and goes to these men of Shechem and says to them, hey, do you want 70 sons of Gideon ruling over you or just one? And they say, well, we just want one. And so they are inclined to what he wants. And so they turn their ear and they follow Abimelech. And then Abimelech kills all of his half brothers and sisters and all the family that we find, or half brothers that we find in verse number 5. And he kills Gideon's sons. And Abimelech does all of this just in a very shrewd way. Verse number 4 tells us that he uses money to hire worthless and reckless men. He goes and he hires the worst of the worst to be on his side and just to really kind of be his mercenaries, if you will. Well, what takes place in verse number 7 down through verse number 21 is Jotham, Abimelech's brother, the one that escaped, he goes before the men of Shechem and the surrounding areas, and he says to them, like, what are you doing? Like, you can go to verse number 7. He stands before them and says, listen to me, you men of Shechem, that God may listen to you. And then he gives this illustration. And verse number 16, now therefore, if you have acted in truth and sincerity in making Abimelech the king, if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal, with Gideon and his house, and have done him as he deserves, for my father fought for you, risked his life, and delivered you out of the hand of Midian, but you've risen up against my father's house. And then he continues and says, listen, if you've done this with sincerity and truth, then yeah, keep following Abimelech. If not, then something needs to take place. And so Jotham gives this encouragement to them. And then you see in verse 22 down through the end of the chapter that there's a man that raises up called Gaal, 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 and he comes out and he speaks to the men of Shechem. And it says in verse number 26 that the men of Shechem, they put their confidence in him. And then at the end of the chapter, verse number 56 and 57, thus God, so they go, they pursue Abimelech, all this war takes place. They kill Abimelech. Verse 55, when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, they departed every man to his place. Thus God repaid the wickedness of Abimelech, which he had done to his father by killing his 70 brothers, and all the evil of the men all the evil of the men of Shechem, God returned on their own heads, and on them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal. So here's what's taking place. Abimelech comes, says, follow me. Jotham comes and says, God is going to judge this. Gaal comes and says, no, follow me. War breaks out. People die. And then once they're all dead, the men of Israel just go back to their wicked deeds and they go back to their houses. Now, there's a lot that takes place in chapter number 9. Really, we could use chapter number 9 for an entire week of episodes. But making it through a book a month, we got to just cruise through it. So I'd encourage you to go read chapter 9. But here's the two things I want to draw from Judges chapter number 9. The first is this. We need to understand this. Abimelech wasn't really a judge. God could have used him, but he didn't, because Abimelech wasn't willing to be used. So here's what I want to ask you. What kind of a leader do you think Abimelech could have been if Gideon would have been what he was supposed to be? You see, Abimelech watched Gideon leave this poor example, and Abimelech just followed in those footsteps. Gideon was the one, I think, as a father, that left off his responsibility to lead well. And man, that ended up coming back to hurt his entire family. And the thought today, I wonder, is what kind of example are you and I to those who follow us? What are they seeing from us? Do they see character and integrity? Do they see honesty? Do they see someone who speaks truth and lives truth? Here was Gideon speaking truth. No one shall rule over you except the Lord. But then not living truth. Oh, by the way, give me these things so we can create this idol worship. I wonder what kind of example I'm setting. And my first thought today is really a challenge. May God help us to lead those who follow us with a right example, with a life that matches the words, with a integrity and with that character that helps people know I'm not just saying one thing and living another. Man, my life matches truth and I speak it each and every day. May God help us to be that type of example. But then I really want to close with looking at the men of Shechem, this group from Shechem. If you go and you read verse number 6, it says that they turned their hearts to follow Abimelech. If you read verse number 7 down through verse number 22, it seems that they're giving ear to the words of Jotham. Then when you go to verse number 26, you find that they turn their ears to the words of Gaal. And the simple thought I want to kind of bring out from this is the men of Shechem were easily swayed by these voices. Abimelech, Abimelech, Jotham, Gaal, the men of Shechem, this group that is supposed to be following the Lord, they are not following the Lord. And yet, here's Jotham saying, hey, listen, my dad defended you. Follow what he did. And these men of Shechem, they just are swayed by each voice that comes. And the challenge I kind of walk away with when I read that is, am I easily swayed by the voices of culture that are around me? Or do I continuously listen to the voice of God? Remember what Jesus said in John chapter 10, my sheep hear my voice and they follow me. Sometimes as followers of God, we don't hear his voice. We don't follow him because we're not hearing his voice, because we're listening to all the voices of culture that are telling us what we should be and how we should live and telling us what our priorities and prerogatives should be. But the truth is that the one voice that should rule and reign in my life should be the voice of the Lord. And God speaks through his word, he speaks through his spirit, and we know that his word and his spirit are always going to line up. So may I, instead of giving culture the influence in my life, may I be reminded from these verses and from the men of Shechem, may I be reminded to only allow God's voice to be the voice and the main influence that I hear in life. I hope that'd be an encouragement to you. Tomorrow, we will jump into chapter number 10, and I think it'll be a help to us. And so have a great day. Let's allow God to work on us that we might be the right influence, and then allow God to have that priority and preeminence in our life as he's the main influence in our life. So hope that'd be a help, and we'll talk to you later.